it's good to stay alive, right? You don't want to die. So in the case of Colorado, you can fart and start a forest fire. So I roll over, I look like a walrus trying to hump off a rock. And I'm not exactly a set of car keys. I'm a pretty big dude. Because that thing leaked like the Iraqi Navy. The flint and steel, if you're going to be Jeremiah Johnson and start a fire with a flint and steel, I highly suggest you practice said task in multiple environments, starting with your backyard and some gasoline, because that ain't easy. My wife included, before we met, she got lost a couple times, and she can get lost in a phone booth. And I've done some pretty dumb things. I mean, I'm not going to church it up.
We strongly suggested that they call it the Gritty Film Tour. They opted for the Full Draw Film Tour, so...
Everybody makes mistakes. Breakfast of champions, Snickers, and Diet Dr. Pepper. Come on, get a piece of it!
Why, yes, Brian, it is true.
That sounds terrible. The days of our lives.
Hello, alright, you're listening to the Gritty Bowman, home of gritty bow hunting films, interviews, tall tales, and a wee bit of manly boasting.
I'm South Cox, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
Hey, this is Corey Jacobson, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
We born and raised outdoors, and you've been listening to the Gritty Bowman.
There you go.
I'm Casey.
And I'm Jordan.
And you're watching...
the Gritty Bowman.
If you like the show, please go to our website at grittybowman.com and subscribe to this podcast and tell your mates and pals about us. Do us a favour and please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. Send your questions and podcast ideas to grittybowman@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can see the video version of this podcast on our website at www.grittybowman.com.
A quick plug here. There's a lot of, in this podcast, there's a lot of visual aids. You took the time to draw on 50 pieces of paper to put together these visual aids. And
Build a lot of trees.
Yeah, and it really helps communicate and explain these concepts to see these visual aids. So folks, guys, you can watch this on YouTube and see the video, or on our website and see the video. Now, if you're out in the woods or you're up where you don't have cell phone reception, you're not going to be able to stream YouTube. And that's where the Gritty Bowman TV really helps, because you can download the podcast to your actual personal device. If you have subscribed to the podcast in iTunes, then the audio version, then you can certainly do it with the video version. And I don't really care if a guy subscribes to Gritty Bowman TV or they don't. But it's a resource out there. If you subscribe to it, you can download this particular podcast, which I will have both NAV podcasts downloaded to my phone. So I can watch them anywhere, anytime, and refresh. I can sit there and go, how did I do that? Even when I'm up on top of the mountain. What was he saying? What did he mean by this? And I can just replay it, right? And so it's good. It's good to get it downloaded if you can. That's my plug. Go do that. It's a lot better than YouTube. Plus, you're not streaming your data, using your data plan to watch it. A lot of the podcasts are great to listen to. This is a particular one where it would be good to have the visual to go along with it. All right, folks, welcome back to the Gritty Bowman podcast. Aaron and I are back, and today we are going to continue the land navigation podcast. Take it away, Aaron.
All right, well, in part one, we covered a lot, and the kind of the pinnacle of that was going over UTM grid, how to read a UTM grid, things like that. Since I posted something on Facebook, Brian and I were doing that. We got a lot of comments, but over the last almost a year, a little less than 8 months, and even before that, I had gotten comments, some haters, some just general questions, about why, physical fitness, diet, land nav, seems like we're doing everything the hard way, doing it this way. And Brian and I have gotten Well, we've got some paleo and fitness haters that have chimed in. And, for me, and maybe it's because of everywhere I've been, traveled in the military and whatever else, I find like land navigation to be one of the key things of, for lack of a better explanation, being a man. Okay, so that's going to come off really bad. But sometime in your life, not to be a motivational speaker here, but probably going to be faced with a test, right? And that test is going to be, in military terms, a go, no go, a pass, fail. And that test could be as simple as your car breaking down on a family trip in a snowstorm and you're stuck there. Or somebody breaks his leg, somebody gets severely injured in the wilderness. And all of the things that we talk about will be key in those situations or in that test. And you're only going to be able to depend on yourself at that particular time. Now, as a society, we become fairly weak. We're soft. We don't get faced with these tests very often. One, because of technology. Two, because we're weenies and we never go out and test ourselves. We never go outdoors hardly. I mean, we do, but the moral of the story here is if you break your leg, Brian Call breaks his leg, and we're 8 miles in. If I can't read an 8-digit, 10-digit grid coordinate, have a common sense about me to tell someone where we're at, because Brian may, be dying or whatever, that's a problem. If I don't know first aid, I don't know how to treat for shock. I don't know how to give a tourniquet if it's a bad cut. Not tourniquets are a last resort. If I don't have the physical fitness level to get my big butt up the mountain and meet someone on a trail or get back to the trailhead, it's a problem. And it's something I feel that everyone should test themselves on. Land navigation is just one of those things. It's not like me or Brian or anyone else of our friends are saying we're the toughest men in the world because we can do this. Brian sucks at navigation. He's learning now. But hand-to-hand, not saying Brian and I are going to do a podcast on hand-to-hand combat, handling yourself physically, being physically fit, nutritionally solid day-to-day, knowing land navigation, knowing a decent amount of how to treat someone medically, all of those things are just normal, everyday, day-to-day life type of stuff that you can use.
Have you ever had a serious backcountry incident or even just life-threatening incident, even in your regular life, where this stuff and knowing this stuff or having this fitness or whatever came into play?
Well, excluding military and contract stuff and all that, keeping that out. Me, myself, I pissed out. I had a kidney stone start to pass 6-ish miles in, and I was solo. All of the things we're talking about came into play there.
That sounds lovely.
I didn't know what was wrong. I thought I was going to die, and I literally was faced with a point, and I thought about my daughter a lot because I didn't want to, leave her. But I thought, man, am I going to pass out from shock? That was a big one. And it's hard to treat yourself for shock only to a certain level because you're the one going into it. Two, I had a point where common sense came into play. Do I load my pack up in case I have to stay the night? Keeping in mind I could barely walk anyway. And I didn't know if my body, I didn't know what was wrong. Do I just beat feet and try to make it down to the trailhead? I had no comms. I had no communication whatsoever. That, I'm not going to tell that whole story. That was one of them. The other ones I've been faced with multiple different times were from people just getting lost and me finding them, or guys being injured while I was backpacking or scouting or whatever else. All of these things came into play. One, treating for shock. That's a huge one, right? You need to know how to treat for shock. At least 10 times I've had to treat hikers for shock, heat stroke, things like that, heat exhaustion, the normal stuff. Mm-hmm. The other thing, too, is a guy cuts himself extremely bad. Now, that's happened a few times hunting, but I ran into hunters where a guy nicked an artery. And it was shooting blood. And at that point, I was like, okay, I don't have, nor do I have the medical ability, but if you can pinch off the artery, you're going to be okay. But either way, I'm not a surgeon. Mm-hmm. But I was smart enough to know what to do, who to call, and give a very precise 10-digit grid coordinate to someone to come get us. And then I was also able to make a litter out of 2 aspen trees my sleeping bag, and a real makeshift sling. All common stuff. Knot tying, another lost art. No one knows how to tie knots. Those are all things that I feel are important.
Yeah.
And it's not that. I mean, obviously, we know I'm a crappy trophy hunter. It doesn't make me a better trophy hunter, but I can survive. I will make it.
Right.
And that's all this stuff is about, is making you into a better woodsman, sort of a better person in a weird, different way. So, not to go on and on about that, land navigation, in my opinion, is just one of those things of having a brief or a decent grasp of how to navigate.
In the world of technology today, we can get away with, so easily with not having these skills. An emergency comes along, dial up someone on the sat phone. You know what I mean? It's like you can just get away with a lot more than you could back in the day. GPS, it'll tell you right where you're at, where to go. Yep. But technology sometimes fails, and there's a lot to do in between. It's not like it's kind of sad when someone dies out in the wilderness from something very preventable, because him or the people he was with didn't have some very basic skills in terms of first aid and navigation.
Right, and
that's why, dude, I carry more than one GPS.
Yeah. Well, you're preparing.
That's right. I mean, if something goes south, I also have a compass, and I know I could walk in a straight line. And eventually I'd probably hit a road or a stream or something and then find my way out. I mean, I have a basic kind of, and then I have that confidence I can survive outside for quite a while, just on, wilderness skills. But still, how much better would that be if I had the ability to really, really understand a map and follow it? That doesn't run out of batteries, dude.
Right. And I mean, I probably, because I have been put in specific situations, off and on, hunting and hiking and everything else, where I came on the scene in the middle of the woods of, a dude and two chicks, and the one chick is blatantly going into hypothermia. I mean, she, not like the normal stuff where you're shaking and you're cold. She can't add 4 + 4 + 4, like the common stuff I usually check people for. I'm like, watch my finger, okay? All right, I'm going to ask you some simple questions. Oh, yeah, her brain is going, right? We need to get her warm. And the guy didn't have the stuff to build a fire nor the knowledge of how. They just took off from Denver and went hiking, where obviously immediately I'm like, oh, here's what we're going to do immediate. Okay, well, that guy, that had been going on for 30 minutes. He's just kind of wandering around what to do, telling her to move. Those things like that, you need to know. So, all right.
Fitness, as far as fitness goes, I just think that's kind of a no-brainer. If it's got to be explained, we have a problem. Because, if you're a whiner about fitness, you're just lazy. That's the... I mean, it's not, everybody has a half hour, an hour to put in some time to try to stay fit. If you're, and fitness, there's no question, saves lives, period. It enhances your quality of life on a day-to-day basis, but out in the wilderness, it saves lives. It makes you a more effective hunter. Maybe not. I would argue that it does make you more effective, but more than that, it just makes the hunt more enjoyable. Right. If you can work your butt off, wake up the next morning, and you're not sore, and you feel like you did the day before after covering miles of country with a heavy pack, that's pretty awesome. That's like, you got to earn that though.
And definitely don't. I know lots of bigger guys that are a little short for their weight, dudes that get it done better than me and kill bigger stuff than I do, but they would be happier or better if they were a little more fit. And go ahead.
You know what blows my mind, and one thing I'm really curious about, I've always admired Roy Roth, but that guy does not look like Cameron.
No.
You have Cameron here who is just
freak's
human specimen. Then you have Roy Roth over here who doesn't. He looks like Santa Claus.
Yeah,
you
he's
know?
big dude. Yeah.
Big dude. And I've always admired Roy Roth. He's just an amazing person, amazing hunter. It was sad his passing, but when I compared those two, it's so funny. They're such good friends. There's no question that Roy Roth got it done. Got it done. And he didn't look like he was doing the same things Cameron did as far as physical fitness goes. So there's absolutely an argument that you don't have to work out every day and be a fit machine to get it done. But I think that Roy's kind of your exception for the most part. There are more guys that are fit make that happen.
Right. And I mean, I guess the final thing for me before we start land nav, there's been 4 times that I can think of that I have had to do some pretty crazy physical things in the mountains where it required a pretty high level of physical ability to basically maybe not save lives, but make a large difference in someone's life or during a hunt or a trip. Meaning, I was physically able, as simple as a guy forgot his sleeping bag. Well, most people at 5 miles in are probably not going to turn around. This is just an example. This isn't one of the 4. I was like, I'll just run back to the truck and I'll grab your bag.
Yeah.
Most people aren't going to do that. That's the trip right there. That they're going back and probably not going to be able to make it back in. Just simple things like that. Fitness is not a horrible thing, but
yeah, I've done that many times where it's like, oh, you left that at the bottom of the canyon. I know my buddy cannot go down there and come back up without serious penalties.
Yeah.
For me, it's just another walk. So
I always
come
look at it
down,
now.
got it, and come back.
You know, you don't need to carry that. And I'm like, it's good exercise. Now, I didn't look at it that way at one point in time in my life, but now I love packing animals out. I love this, it's good fitness. I test my strength, whatever. But
yeah.
All right. Well, let's go into
Okay.
land. This could turn into another crisis like
Nice
you.
job, Preacher Aaron. Thanks.
What can I? Deep thoughts from a shallow mind. So we're going to hit today basically converting. There's a thing called a declination diagram on the map we talked about in the first portion. And that's your difference between grid north and magnetic. There's 3 norths: true north, grid north, and magnetic north.
Yep.
Let's forget about true north. It doesn't apply. But on the declination diagram, you're going to have something that looks a little bit like that. And it's going to be grid north and then magnetic. And then it's going to tell you how many degrees it's off. Now, it's not always to the right. Magnetic north, depending upon where you're at in the world, sometimes it will be to the left or to the right of grid. Now, where this comes into play, or why that's important, is you will need to convert from magnetic north to grid north if you're plotting something from hands-on shooting an azimuth to something and then plotting it on the map, or in reverse. You're at a lake, you want to go to another lake, you figure out with your protractor what degrees or what your bearing is going to be from one lake to another. You're going to have to convert that azimuth from your grid to your compass, or you will be off, depending upon where you're at in the world, 20, 30, 40, whatever degrees, and depending upon the distance, you may be this far off in the first 100 meters or yards, but by the time you've gone a mile, it gains exponentially. If you start 10 degrees off, you're traveling 10 degrees off as you go on. So you need to be able to convert grid to magnetic, magnetic to grid. Now, for this block of instruction, we're going to use 10 degrees because it's an even number and it's simple. I think where you're at, it's 22 degrees, 22.5, 23, something like that. Quite a bit more. So now that you have the base idea of you just need to be able to convert to be able to travel, when you look at the declination diagram, it will be either on the bottom of the map and it'll look just like this, pretty much, or you'll have something that looks like a compass on the map and it'll be offset and it'll basically have the 306-degree tick marks. It'll be offset, and then it'll tell you how many you're off. So just make sure where your declination diagram's off.
It's right on the map. You showed me the other day on your map. It's pretty obvious.
You'll find it. So the big challenge here is figuring out how to convert. It is, once you grasp the idea, it's fairly simple, but it took me a minute to get it when I first started this. Now, there's something called LARS, which is left add, right subtract, which is I guess it was an acronym. And what that means is if your magnetic, because I'm looking at this backwards, if your magnetic is to the right of grid, you subtract when you're converting one to the other. Now, before we go too crazy into this, I'll read it off how that works. I got a lot of notes here, so let me get that figured out. So when you are going to be heading into give you an example, when you're going to be heading into the woods and you're going to leaving the GPS out of this, you're going to be at a lake like before. And you know that from your map, you set your protractor down, and I talked about, I usually have a string through the middle of mine, 360 degrees. I set this flat on the lake that I'm on, and I'll spin this over till I hit the other lake. And that string will line up with the specific degrees or azimuth I will need to travel, okay? The other would be, I'm shooting an azimuth with my compass to a point I can see, okay? And then I need to convert it. All right, so the idea...
So in one case, you're going from the map to the compass, and the other one, you're going from the compass to the map.
Right, and we'll start off with... the magnetic to grid. So we're going to go convert from our azimuth that we've shot with our compass.
So I see a mountain. I see a dead snag on this hillside. I aim my compass there, shoot my azimuth, and then I'm going to convert
And plot it out on your map. So if you're going to convert magnetic to grid, okay, so your magnetic azimuth to grid, and on your declination diagram, it's to the right, okay? It's east.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to add 10 degrees to magnetic when you put it on grid.
Yep.
And that's where it comes in.
Makes total sense. Just so just let's get on with it, dude. How do you do it?
All right, that's it. We just did it. It's that simple. It's just where it gets confusing is the left add, right subtract. What it is don't get confused with these arrows because one's right, one's left. If it's to the right, if your magnetic declination point or GM angle is to the right of grid, you subtract, or if it's to the
yeah, it says on the top.
It's to the left. I'm looking at this backwards. If grid is to the left, you add, and if it's to the right, you subtract.
Okay, grid is what you have labeled in the center.
Yep.
Okay, so if grid is on your left, then magnetic, you add, and if it's to the right,
you subtract.
So that's a little confusing because I'm picturing myself at grid, and instead of put it back up, at magnetic.
This is where it gets confusing because you can get goofy because
really
you're
screwed up.
This is to the right.
Yep, exactly, because your arrow's pointing that way.
Yeah.
But really, if you had a little person standing, he'd be standing on either that left flag or on the right flag.
You could look at it that way, and then you want to think of it as your grid. Your little person standing over here, and your grid is to the left.
So now, I need to add. If I'm on the other side, I need to subtract.
So converting, and maybe people will, I wrote it down here, but that's going to be tough to read. So when you're converting magnetic to grid, and your arrows to the right, meaning you're magnetic, you add the 10 degrees or whatever your declination or GM angle tells you. Okay. And if it's to the west, it's opposite. Okay. So that's where the left add, right subtract comes in. So if and this is where it gets confusing because then it's asked backwards when it's grid to magnetic. So we won't go into a ton of detail because we spend an hour on this. Just Google it and look at it. But this is
Google it, look at it, and freaking write it down somewhere.
Right, and it'll become second nature eventually. Because to me, I've done it so much, it's easy, and it is a little bit difficult to explain. Again, magnetic to grid, when the arrow's to the right, you add your GM angle or the 10 degrees. Yep. Okay, so I've shot my azimuth from my lake to my mountain, and it's 110 degrees. Boom. I add 10 degrees. My declination diagram or GM angle tells me it's to the right. I add 10.
120 degrees.
Plot it on the map. It's 120. And I should, technically, if I'm doing it right, run into it on the map. I should, be able to go 120 and it should run. Exact opposite. I'm on the map, which is where I use it more, is when I'm figuring out what, azimuth I want to travel on. It's just in reverse.
Yep.
So now I've converted it. I'm to the right, 10 degrees.
Yep.
I subtract 10, converting from grid to magnetic.
That makes sense. So, Aaron, basically, when you're going from magnetic to grid or from grid to magnetic, you need to convert to the proper degrees based on the declination diagram. And whether you add or subtract depends on which side of grid you're on your map. Or it depends on, whether you're shooting your azimuth with your compass or whether you're going from the map on which way you need to convert.
Right. And so we don't make this thing 4 hours. Google converting grid to magnetic to grid. It'll tell you everything you need to know so we don't go over the same thing 15 times.
Yep.
Where this is important is obviously the drift you would have if you don't convert, which in your case, 22 degrees over 2,000 yards, you're way off from where you want to be.
Yeah.
Now,
the concept is super simple. It's really just a matter of keeping the
remembering the left add, right subtract, right. So now, why that? Once you figure out that, and you've become really in tune with that, we'll move on to a back azimuth. Now, where this comes in line is when you start doing intersection and resection, or if you've lost something between point A and point B. Intersection and resection we'll cover in a minute. First, we need to do a back azimuth, how to do that, because that's important to intersection and resection. So on a back azimuth, it's pretty simple. I've got two little charts here. Let me pull them out. If you are traveling at 55 degrees, this is your direction of travel. Can you see that good?
Yep.
And this is me, and this is a lake.
Yep.
Okay, and I've done all my proper things, and I'm following my compass. And somewhere pretty close to the lake, I figure out I have lost my cell phone. This happens to me all the time. Now, if you're just wandering around in the woods aimlessly and you have no idea of what azimuth or direction of travel you were going on, you're screwed. Just go wander around the woods. That's about all I can offer you. But if you were traveling at a specific azimuth, you can shoot a back azimuth and travel the same course in reverse exactly. How that's done, another little diagram. If you're traveling at an azimuth over 180 degrees, say 186, you subtract 180 to go the exact opposite way. So in the case of my first little diagram, the back azimuth of 55 is 235 degrees. Under 180, I add. That's 235.
Yep.
That's so then,
that's easy.
Yeah. You just stop, turn around, travel back to where
going backwards.
Look for your cell phone.
You got 360 degrees. What was the cutoff if you're over 180?
half of it, 180. So 186, whatever. Yeah, you got it. Over 180, subtract, under, add.
Yep.
Okay, get a back azimuth. Get rid of that little
Sweet,
diagram.
all that math.
It's simple math, but it is math. I had a math teacher in high school that I didn't like very much, and I wonder if he would be proud of me because I can do simple addition and subtraction.
The army was good to you.
Dorsey Smith, right?
Yeah.
You should know right there. He's a clown. Dorsey Smith.
Smith.
He was good at basketball, and I hope he listens to this because I will find. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so now grab another chart here. We're going to talk about intersection and resection. I got about 40 pieces of paper, so bear with me as I get these all out.
We're go. Red team go.
Okay, well, this is take 2 because I screwed up the explanation a little bit. Mostly because I have chicken scratch for handwriting. So we're going to talk about resection. There's intersection and resection. We'll cover resection first. Resection is when you have one unknown location and you have 2 or more known locations.
And that unknown location we'll pretend is Brian Call. Lost.
Right. Now, intersection and resection do the same thing, which is it took Brian a minute while I was cussing, saying, dang it, I explained them incorrectly. Resection is you're lost, but you can see multiple points that you probably know what they are. They're very pinpointed tops of mountains. So in this case, there's me or Brian, and we're lost. And we have, let's see, Lake Opal, Mount Baker, Mount Jefferson. These are all in different states. It doesn't matter. And Tabletop Mountain. So what I'm going to do from my position is I'll shoot an azimuth from where I am to Lake Opal. Okay? Because I have a map. So I know that's probably Lake Opal. Once I have that azimuth, I add the 10 degrees or follow my declination diagram, add the GM angle. So I shoot and it's 110. I add 110. Now I have 120.
Yep.
Once I have 120, I go to the map. I take my protractor. I go to my the lake, basically. And I go from that lake. Then I take my back azimuth. Okay, yep. So shoot the azimuth from my unknown location to the lake. All right, now I'm at the lake, and it's 110 degrees. I add the 10, 120. Then I convert to a back azimuth.
Yep.
Okay, so
which we already covered all of that. So
right,
you see your mountain, you shoot your azimuth, you do your conversion, and you do your back azimuth, and you come back. Now you have a line that goes from that known location back for infinity.
Yeah, which let me tell you, this is much more difficult to teach than it is to do. So now we have the one line coming back.
Yep.
All right, now I do that exact same thing. You only need 2 points to get resection. Okay, you only need 2 known points and 1 unknown. But if you have more than 2, multiple lines intersecting is not going to hurt anyone. So where all of these intersect is my exact location.
What a killer example, Aaron. That's a nice piece of paper there.
So we'll go over this real quick one more time. 1 unknown, 2 or more known. Brian and myself are both lost, and we have know where we are. We go to the first known point. We shoot an azimuth to it. We convert, add 10, do a back azimuth. Then we take our protractor, we put it in the middle of that lake, the middle of that known location, and we draw a line straight back for infinity.
Using your degrees.
Yeah, you're using your back azimuth.
Your back azimuth. Yep.
And then repeat said task at all known points. And then you have your exact location. And because we learn how to read a UTM grid on the last podcast, you take your protractor, you figure out exact 10-digit grid of where you're at, where all those intersect. Google that for a better explanation, but that pretty much is the meat and potatoes of it. Now you have intersection. Where's my little intersection chart? Dang it. It doesn't matter. It wasn't that big of a deal. Oh, intersection. This is where you know your location, okay? and you're going to, off of 2 or more points, known points, figure out an unknown point. Where the terminology here is in resection, I'm lost, and I'm figuring out back azimuths because I need to figure out where I am. Now, I know where I am. I'm at the top of one mountain. I can see my ISIS village I want to blow up, okay? And I'm calling to Anthony, and he's going to drop the bomb, okay? Anthony's back on a ship or something.
Mm-hmm.
Brian and I are going to shoot a magnetic azimuth from our known point to the village. Let's say 110 again. Then we convert. We add, because we're going magnetic to grid. We add the 10 degrees. We go from that known, follow that line. Then we go to another known point. We do the exact same thing.
Or let's say you have 4 different guys.
Yep, same thing.
And they're each in like surrounding the village.
Yep.
And they have GPS coordinates, right? They know exactly where they're at.
Yep.
From that point, they each shoot an azimuth to that village, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And everybody then puts on their map all the lines going from each individual to that point. And where they intersect, that's where you drop the bomb.
Exactly. And Brian brings up a good point. It doesn't have to be a mountaintop. It's just that's usually what's most applied, okay? Like 2 guys glassing could see 1 mule deer and maybe unsure of its location. One guy can give the other guy his 10-digit grid, me being, let's say, the most familiar. I can plot his 10-digit grid in my own, and he can give me the azimuth or the direction from him to the deer. And then I can take mine from the direction where I am to the deer, and where those intersect is where that deer's location is. Now I have a 10-digit grid coordinate of that deer, and then I can plot that on my map.
That's cool, dude, because often this is how Brian does it. Okay, you ready? So on my Onyx map, I download the satellite image.
Yeah.
Right? And then I look at the satellite image and I'm going, that deer is by that tree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I go, he's about right there. And I put a point on the GPS.
Yep.
Then I circle the mountain and try to find him. But what you're saying is a lot more precise, because if I have a buddy here, like 3 of us, 200 yards apart on these ridge tops, and we all see the deer, we all shoot our azimuth to the deer, we can then take each of those and put them together to come up with exactly where that deer's at.
Exactly. Now, I've never used it specifically for that deer, but there's been a few times we've been far enough in the middle of nowhere, and there's a few different lakes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a little more difficult to do. Well, maybe we forgot our map.
Maybe.
But we want to know, dang it, what lake was that? I will write down my buddy's position that he took and the azimuth he was at. I'll write down where I was, and we might get a third. And I don't even need a map, because when I get home, I'll plot all those out and take that data and figure out what lake that was, or if that lake even had a name.
Got it. Because I'm sitting there going, okay, Anthony tells me, Brian, I'm at such, my UTM grid is blah. And I got Ben over here and you're over here. And you each tell me your UTM grid. And I put you each on the map. So I got 4 dots now, right? I got this guy here, this, and I have your pinpoint exact locations on the map. And then we each can shoot our azimuth to that deer on the side of the mountain. And then I can write down, I can draw a line from each person's azimuth to there, and I can get that location of that deer. That's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, or lake or someone's camp. Yeah. Right. So the easiest way to explain this, and please make light of this, is resection is I'm retardedly lost. Resection. Because I have to resect to my point. So 1 unknown point, 2 or more known points, shooting an azimuth, taking a back, resection.
Right. Aaron, on this podcast, we're very PC. Retard just, please don't use that word.
My instructor was like, resection is because you're retarded and got lost. And I have always remembered that. So that's resection. Intersection, you know where you're at, multiple points.
Mm-hmm.
You're shooting azimuths, do the conversion. I would say if you take anything from this point, because Brian has to go pick up his kid, is learn the left add, right subtract, grid to magnetic, magnetic to grid, and remember how to convert that, because none of this works very well if you screw the math up, right? I mean, you'll be close,
Yeah.
but we're talking pinpoint type stuff.
Yeah,
you know?
practice
You have
this
to find a
stuff a little
sign in the military. It's just this little sign, so it's not very big.
Yeah, I need a little thing like I'm gonna make a little like a laminated card for all my add, subtract, left, right. Grid.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've got to take a break because I got to talk to Patrick, and then we're going to go over applying some of this of actual things that I've run into and where it comes into play of everything we've talked about in part 1 and 2.
Excellent. All right, I'll see you in a bit.
All right. Cool.
Bam, we are back.
We had a momentary pause for Kafaru business and kid schooling.
Yes.
We left off. Go
Had to
ahead.
drop my daughter off at school, and Aaron had to answer 50 billion emails. So we are back.
Yeah. Yep, we're back. So we left off on back azimuth, intersection, resection.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple stuff. So the one thing that we've left out that is key, if you completely get rid of your GPS unit and you are going to manually land nav or learn it, that is pace count. Pace count is very important because you need to know what distance you've traveled. And in the military, the way that you would do it is those beads that I can't say it, but look like a mini set of Benoit beads that hang off your shoulder are they're ranger beads. They're for your pace count. You can build them. You go to a craft store, build them easy enough. You take 550 cord, make sure the round bead is small enough to where it's a tight friction fit as you slide it up or down. What that means is you put 10 of them on there. Every 100 meters you travel, you slide one bead up, 200, 300, and that tells you your distance. That only works, though, if you know your pace count. So you don't want to count every step you take. You want to do every other. So every time your left foot hits the ground, what you would want to do is get a 100-meter course and just walk it normally on flat ground. And then you count how many times your left foot hits the ground, 65 times, whatever the case may be, in an average walk in 100 meters. And then you want to get a rough terrain pace count, which is going to be a bit of a guess, but roughly. And you can usually figure on 1,200 meters in an hour, roughly, in rough terrain. You know, people are like, oh, I can go faster than that. Between map checks, pace counts, obstacles, you can guess 1,200 meters or so in an hour. There's 1,600 meters in a mile, 1,760 something yards in a mile. But you need to know the distance you've traveled. You can have your little checkpoints on your map as well. You can simplify it if you have trail crossings or primary terrain features, things that you know, you can gauge your distance off of that. Mm-hmm. But you need to be able to know your pace count. And some guys will do rocks in their pocket. You can do 10 rocks in your right pocket, throw it in your left. Every 100 meters you go. That way you know how far you've gone. Now, I never do that anymore because there's always something in the way of me to reconfirm my position and the distance I've traveled. But if you're pinpointing something, you really need to know your pace count. Okay. The next thing that you need to figure out from the pace count, not the next thing. Make sure that you figure out your smooth, rough terrain pace count. The reason why that is important, other than distance, is certain things you're going to certain obstacles you'll be, presented with while you're doing land nav manually. One would be a lake. You're going to have a large area in the middle of, as you're traveling on your azimuth, you may hit a lake that you can't walk across. There's a couple ways to do that. The easiest that I do, and I've always done, is shoot an azimuth, the one I'm traveling on, to the point on the lake on the other side, and then I just haul ass around the lake and get to the other side and take off again on my azimuth. But let's say you can't do that. It's just a sheer wall of trees and there's no pinpoint. You do a box method, okay? It's pretty simple. To simplify things, we're traveling straight north. This is us, okay? And then if you're traveling straight north, a straight 90-degree angle is going to box us around.
Mm-hmm.
And then we travel north again.
Straight 90 degrees.
And then you take a hang a left and you head at 270 degrees. Okay?
Yep.
Now, where that comes into play, you have to know your pace count to get back on this. So 200 meters, 200, 200. I'm back on track. I'm high speed. I know where I'm going. Okay? If you don't know your pace count, you're going to be effed up like a football bat, and you're not going to have any idea of where to start back off from. That's why pace count would be important. One of the reasons.
If you had to go around a big lake or you had to do something like that, you get to the other side, you'd have to reshoot your azimuth and all that. If assuming you could still see your points, or
you wouldn't even know
points. This way, you don't have to, because you just use your pace count to travel at 90 degrees. Use your compass, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees till you're back, and you just pace count it to the right.
Yeah, your right distance. Mm-hmm. Now, it's very simple. If you're traveling at 260, then you add 90, subtract 90, subtract 90 and then add it.
260 degrees is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, so you're basically all you got to do is every 90 degree you take, whether it's a left or a right, you add or subtract it.
Yep.
So easy enough. So that's the box method and why pace count is important. The box method I don't hardly ever use because I don't navigate that way, but it's important. Now, there's a few other things that you need to think about that are also like the box method. This one we run into all the time. You're traveling on this azimuth, whatever that may be, and you hit a river crossing, okay? But you don't find a place to cross the river for quite some distance down on your pace count. Now, this is easy enough because you don't need to really do your pace count up because you're just crossing a river, right? Not a big deal as far as you don't need to worry about things as much. You just need to track your distance. You travel down the river until you found your crossing and then just come back that same distance.
Right.
Yeah. And then, obviously, I've drawn up here the other example of I shot my azimuth across and I hit a beaver dam and I shot my azimuth to the beaver dam. It was within 20 meters of my direction of travel. I make a, stay cognizant of that, okay, my azimuth actually is, let's say, 22 degrees left of that beaver dam or 100 yards, whatever the case may be. I start back off 100 yards to the left of it. Easy enough. Now, applying this with your GPS, everything we've learned in the last 2 blocks of instruction. Now, in most cases, and I've already explained a couple times what I do, we're completely lost, not completely lost. We wandered around all day. I've marked my camp on my GPS, and now we need to get back to camp, and I haven't really paid any attention to it, which I should be. I turn my GPS on again, and I mark my point of where I am. My GPS has I've already turned my GPS on to mark my camp. That's where I'm going.
Yep.
So now I just need to know what direction of travel. A couple ways I can do that. I can plot on my map the 2 10-digit grids my GPS has given me, or what I normally do is my GPS will tell me what direction I need to travel to get back to my camp. So then on my GPS, which I've shown before, but this is a Garmin. It's a Fortrex 401, just a little GPS. It'll tell me what I need to travel on. On the other side of this, I have a Sunto compass. All I do is then flip this over on my wrist. I just follow my azimuth my GPS told me to. I'm in good, and I travel until I hit my camp. Another thing that you can take into consideration when doing that is the watch and the contour line method. I'm not going to want the shortest distance between 2 objects is a straight line. I may not want to take a straight line, right? I may have some objects in the middle.
It may not be the shortest distance by the time you climb over 50. The shortest time, I should say.
Yeah. So in that case, I want to stay cognizant of not dropping altitude. Altitude is the devil. Dropping it is the devil's son. So I'm going to keep an eye on my watch that I know my tent was at 10,286 feet on my watch. I'm going to pay attention to that as I'm following my azimuth on my watch or my sun toe. And then if I hit some problem areas on the way, I'm going to keep in my mind I don't want to drop altitude. I'm going to plan the shortest distance and the easiest distance to get to my tent, right? My camp. It's easy enough. If you wander around haphazardly, like I see a lot of people do with their GPS on, looking up and down, trying to figure out where camp is, you can simplify that by paying attention to your surroundings, knowing how to follow an azimuth, and then just being mindful of the elevation you're gaining and you're dropping.
Yeah. I found, especially when you're dealing with very steep elevation terrain, paying attention to your elevation will save you some serious hiking. And sometimes, your camp is you're on a hill, and the temptation is just to keep climbing that hill to the top and then walk over to where your camp is. If you're like toward the top, but sometimes our camp is 200, 300 yards from the top of the mountain.
Yeah.
And so you walk up, you just walk back down again.
Yeah.
Why do that if there's a good trail? And you see game trails, the elk and the deer and all that, they figured that out, man. They
definitely
stay
take the path of least resistance for the most part.
And so a lot of times you'll hit those game trails and you'll see the brilliance of it because they will stay at that elevation along. Why take you to the peak, to get you to where you need to be, because your camp may be like just a little ways down from the top. It's important to pay attention to that elevation.
Another good example that we face in Colorado all the time, so the steepness is, I have, this is a valley, okay, and a very crude way to look at it. And there's a creek here, and I need to get water. So if I'm coming in hot, right, way up here, but this valley, all valleys do it, is going to gain altitude at a much, it's going to gain altitude gradually, generally, most valleys or basins. And I'm up here, and at the end of the day, I want to be up here I want to be up here at the end of it anyway. So what I'm going to do, since the contour line at the top of the valley, way up here, bottom, top, isn't a whole lot different from the contour line I'm on now, way up here. Rather than drop down, get water, and hike all the way up this, well, common sense will come into play. Stay on this contour line up here and gradually follow that contour line as this altitude is changing here, and I haven't lost any altitude to get to my water.
And they meet up.
Yeah, one will meet up into another. That's also, do a bit of terrain analysis in the middle there. Now,
Ben and Anthony especially Ben, they're both really good at that kind of. They see the land that way,
right?
And they're very good at hiking into spots and without losing elevation. And a lot of times these paths are way faster, even though the distance is longer. Like it might take a lot longer to go at the same elevation to get to that water, twice the distance, but the energy expended is half because you're not going straight down and straight up again.
Yep. And when we plan out, depending upon where we're at, some of the different, when you can see specifically, keeping the map out of it for the most part, or the GPS, reading topography or reading the lay of the land is hugely important. If you're above tree line and you can see everything, and you're looking at a distance or you're looking in a direction you want to get to, being able to just read the terrain to get there and making a mental note of it is hugely important. It doesn't have really a lot to do with GPS or maps or anything else. It has to do with terrain association, topography, and reading the land that you're on, because in some ways, it's easier to just drop straight down and up. But if you're looking here and you've got whatever, even your truck, but you're dropping, in some cases here, 1,800 vertical feet and then climbing back up. But if you look over here, it may go way around, but you're only gaining a loss of 100 feet at a time because you're following somewhat of a knife edge ridge or a ridge line. You want to be able to do that. That also comes into play when you're at home looking at where you're going to go, looking at the map, plotting out using the things we talked about, and then plotting out where you might go and the easiest way to get there. And then the book is important, having the little notebook, okay? So if I'm smart and I'm going into an area I've never been, most areas I've already been to, but if I haven't been there, I may plot out, it may not even be a 10-digit grid coordinate. I may write down in my little Write in the Rain notebook, water source at this point, right? And predetermine those. One, it'll save me from getting my map out sometimes. Or if my map is out and, I don't know where I'm at, I'll already have it marked on my map. Then I figure out where I'm at with a 10-digit grid, turning my GPS on, and I can be like, oh, from here, we just got to follow this up, hang a left, and we're right to a creek or camp or whatever. So all of this meshes together, really, using your GPS, learning how to read a UT or plot a UTM grid. And then if you're lost, the intersection and resection, mostly resection, will come into play when you're just flat out have no idea where you're at.
Well, I'll tell you that this year, I'm kind of very interested in using this to help pinpoint an animal on the side of a giant mountain, because I spot them with my binoculars. I see right where he's bedded, right? I probably have, in case in point, this year, while hunting, I put this nice 6x6 bull to bed. He beds down. He looks like he's going to be there a while. I beat feed over there. I think I have the terrain all figured out. So when I get there, I can hike right to this tree, down to this spot. Boom, I'm on top of this bull. Bryce is on the radio back on the hill. He can tell me if the bull has moved or if he's still there. I get over there, and I cannot figure out where the heck I am. I can't recognize any trees. It seems like it looks completely different on the ground there than it did on the mountain over there. And I hadn't plotted it out. I didn't use like a satellite image or anything else. I didn't look at it on a map before I got over there. I didn't keep track of my own location. Yet there were a lot of things I could have done before I went over there to sort of pinpoint where that bull was so I could hike into it a little more, with more precision.
Yeah.
And South Cox, in those early podcasts I did with South down at his place, he's a master at mule deer, stalking mule deer, identifying where they're at, his markers once he gets over there, and he describes in detail kind of how he plots his routes and all that stuff. It's all kind of done up here in his head before he even leaves, right? I haven't been able to duplicate that with a lot of precision yet. It's a skill I'm working on.
Yeah.
But I definitely long story short, I wandered around for like 5 hours. That bull laid there, and I wandered around within 100 yards of him for 5 hours. And then he just stood up and walked away. Wind was good. I had all day long to sneak. At one point I was within 80 yards and didn't know it. Just couldn't. And I ended up going up 300 yards higher up the hill, thinking that was the spot. I had it mixed up, and only to circle back to that other spot originally. And it was one of the most frustrating days of hunting I've ever had, because it was such a perfect situation, and I screwed it up so royally.
Yeah. The other thing that this comes into play, not necessarily intersection, but knowing where the animal was if you've taken a shot. Let's say, because you're about to post ethical shot distance. Well, let's say your ethical shot distance with the rifle is a bit away, like far distances. Mm-hmm. And you're in North Idaho, and it's pretty wooded, right? Dog hair thick timber.
Yeah.
And there was one opening you had where this bear came out in, and you shoot. And
1,200 yards.
Yeah, 1,200 yards. You're not overly confident of how you hit the animal. Right? You don't know. It ran off. It could have been hit, not. But you want to do your best. Go track it. It was 1,200 yards, so you're good there. Rangefinders will tell you that most will range 1,200. Mm-hmm. The point you were at, and you probably can figure out the point that animal was at on a map, roughly. So immediately, with technology, you can scroll your arrow over, move it to the right, left, and then boom, hit a pin so you're close. That's one option. The next option, while you're at the point you are, is get your map out, plot your, where you are exactly, turn your GPS on, plot your 10-digit grid. I'm right here. Shoot your azimuth. Okay, left add, right subtract.
You can point right at the meadow you shot him in.
Yep, and then I'm going to add my 10 degrees. Okay, or what we talked about earlier. Okay, protractor goes on there, plot it out, draw a line straight over. Okay.
Yep.
I may not need to know my exact point, but I can get on that line and travel on it, and I know I'll cross it eventually where he was. Once I'm on that line, common sense tells me if I'm traveling on that line came out of a gun. It came right out of my gun. I just keep ranging my position until I hit 1200. It's a very crude form of intersection.
Ranging back from where you shot from, basically.
Right. I don't have two intersecting points.
Yep.
But my second point is my rangefinder, because I've went over on my azimuth or my bullet, and I've gone above it. I've gone farther. I know it's farther because I have common sense.
200 yards too far or something.
I stop, I turn around, I range, I'm at 1480.
You're on your azimuth, you got your compass out, you range, and you're like, okay, I got to close 200 yards on this azimuth.
That's my back azimuth, right? Shooting back to my position. I just keep walking closer, and it's pinpoint with long distance and a rangefinder. 1281, I'm on my back azimuth. Boom, I'm golden. I am right where I shot him from. I do the circle method, see if I can find any blood. Have I hit it or not? That is a crude method of doing intersection, which most people don't ever think of, but it's the same basic principle. Yeah. I have a stopping point. I have my 1, my 2. I've just got the 1. I have a stopping point on it. That tells me my pinpoint location of where that bear was shot at.
You're just not as dumb as you look, dude.
Well, considering from Detroit Lake, I think there was 11 people in my high school. I know, right? It's a miracle. My teachers would be proud. I actually do get comments from some of them that I have made it as far as I have. Oh, Lord.
That's good stuff.
I have to smile more. So, a brief recap. Go ahead.
Recap? You mean recap?
Well, Oregon and Detroit, I panicked.
No, I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
How long does it take for you, like, all this stuff is great, but it seems like there's some things you can get mixed up on, man, like the number here, the number there, or subtract, add, grid coordinate versus magnetic, and grid north, magnetic north, the conversion, back azimuth, subtracting, your degrees and all that stuff. It seems like it can be, you can get some of this stuff mixed up. How long does it take, a guy to do this where it becomes pretty second nature?
If you started now, you'll have it by next hunting season. It doesn't take that long. And I would block it out. Just like my daughter shooting a bow. She doesn't go to a farther distance unless she sneaks it on me until she can hit a specific size circle multiple times, and then she goes back. Okay, she doesn't like it, but it makes her a better archer. And I'm not taking away her birthday, so it's not that big of she has goals, right?
Yeah.
And the way everyone gets a ribbon anymore when you enter a contest in today's society. Winning isn't that important, just competing is. Well, set your own goals for navigation. So, first goal, pinpoint your pace count, okay? Okay, as far as physical goals, you need to learn your pace count. But let me jump back. First goal, become very aware of your major and minor terrain features, or primary and supplementary, or whatever they are.
Okay.
Know the terrain features, not just what they look like on a map, but being able to look to the side of a mountain and in your brain saying, oh, that's where it is on the map. So 3D, hands-on view to map view. Make sure you know that. Become very familiar with what your map is telling you immediately, meaning the UTM, grid, degrees, minutes, all those different things. Know where they are on the map and know how to put them in your GPS immediately when you get the map. So become familiar with your GPS.
Yep.
So block it out, right? Don't try to do it all at once. It won't work.
Just practice, chunk out a few skills at a time. Block it all out, and then just work on mastering this bit and then this bit and then this bit until you're there.
And yeah, once you hit the pinnacle where you feel you're comfortable with all of them, you need to go on a fantastic voyage and apply those skills. Get out in the woods. And
A fantastic voyage.
I
like that.
I think that, what's that dude's name? Coolio? Right? That was right in my wheelhouse for my age, I think. Wasn't it any Gangster's Paradise, Welfare Paradise, whatever it was?
Yeah.
So my wife is super cool, and she'll drop my big butt off in the middle of nowhere at any time. Or she'll pick me up in the middle of nowhere. Now, as simple as that sounds, I get dropped off in a mountain range a couple times, 20 to 30 miles. I did a couple videos on Rock Slide 3 years ago. She dropped me off, and I traveled like 28 miles. And I was able to hit a trail intersection in 28 miles. And her friend went on a adventure hike 2 miles up from the trailhead and picked me up. And it was funny. I was sweating, and it was hot, and they traveled so far. And I just basically traveled from Breckenridge to freaking, Fairplay, or not Fair. Yeah, Fairplay. I mean, I went a long ways.
28 miles.
And I should get better, and maybe we'll start doing that, of filming some of those adventures and talking about them. And I've done it a few times, which has just raised questions because I just told enough to have people ask questions of what I was doing at that time. But as I'm traveling, meaning with land nav, as I'm traveling down a mountain range and I'm scoping things out, I am always cognizant of my surroundings, the direction of travel, and how I'm going to make my life easier on my long route, okay? Whether it be a box method, following an azimuth, because in the grand scheme of things, if I'm at 12,000 feet and I'm traveling 28 miles, and 10 miles away, I can see a giant rock outcropping on a peak. I don't even need to get a GPS out, a compass, really anything. I can just look on my map with terrain analysis, do a rough estimate of my grid squares. Yeah, those look the same. That's got to be the mountain I'm looking at. It has to be. There's a lake to the left. I don't really pay attention to anything until I get there because I have my goal target. Once I get to that, I piddle around, screw off, and then I have another goal target. I get in the woods. Now I start cracking down on my knowledge. I start using an azimuth, and I start following my compass.
Right. Plus,
Yeah.
you also have your coordinates, your UTM coordinates with you all the time on your GPS. You can quickly plot yourself if you really needed to without using intersection or resection.
And I don't want the guys at Onyx Hunt Maps to shoot me because I'm not saying don't use like their program, because I'm a firm believer in their program. I can tell you why. A couple areas we hunt, you are running the ragged edge of the wrong unit, okay? And in Colorado, that can be the top of a mountain. And you don't know. I mean, where's the top of a mountain, right? I mean, you don't know
or
exactly.
Private property.
Yeah. Now, I'm getting to the private property, but that goes without saying. That's how you know you're going into a good area. But you need to know if you're about to break the law, right? You need to know when that deer is going from unit 72 to 76 or whatever.
Yep.
That Onyx Hunt Maps is a very legal way for you to say, this is where I was. This is where that animal was. And this showed me that I was in the right. Now, most game wardens aren't going to be back there 8 miles, but it'll tell you exactly that line. Mm-hmm. Which if you you're on the Continental Divide, which is a barrier of a lot of units, and it's a big bench. All right, well, where is the middle of that bench? And as weird as it is, you will be faced in Colorado of the little devil on one shoulder and the little angel on the other. Is that animal crossing the line? Has he made it into my unit? Because a lot of them are split from, draw unit, or they're all draw units, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Anthony and Ben were in Colorado, and that's the thing they were facing multiple times. Yeah. And there are even parts where there's a fence that says no shooting beyond this point, and it's private property, but it's 200 yards over on the public.
Mm-hmm.
And they technically can shoot on the other side of that fence.
Yeah.
And the game warden's fully aware of it and knows it's not posted correctly and all of that. But without having those those maps to help you and stuff, it's hard to know for sure.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I use,
And that's not going to be on your map,
no,
that you buy at REI.
no, it's definitely not. And I mean, I think the Onyx hunt map thing is a great resource.
What I like about Onyx is I do like the satellite imagery. It kind of helps me get another slice of what it looks like in that area. And I'm really good with pictures,
Yeah. Well, I have a lot of guys use their cell phones right now with
which I've been doing because my screen's way bigger. It's easier to move it around and all that. But I'll tell you, when you use a satellite image, sometimes, depending on the shadows or the day the image was taken, you can get canyons mixed up with mountains. Like, it looks like it's a canyon, but it's actually a mountain. So it helps to switch back and forth between layers. So you got your satellite image, and you flip and look at your topo, and you can then go, that's this gradual increase in darker green or this slope is actually a slope going downhill, not uphill. And sometimes you're looking at it like in the units we were in, and it'll play tricks on you if you use a satellite image.
Right. And I like on Phil and it's Phil's sheep hunt where I was with him, we hit that one water source that really saved our lives. That was in the timber. Now, I didn't write it in my book at the time, but I did turn on my GPS. But that's in my what I call my God book. That is my very important book of different units of things I must know. So if I ever take a guy into that basin, or I draw that sheep tag myself, and I take that horrible route I decided to send Phil and I on, I have a 10-digit grid to that water source, which I will use. This year was a dry year, and it was flowing, so I know I can get water there. Now, Onyx hunt maps, or whatever it's called, will not do that for you, right?
Yeah.
So what I guess I'm getting at is use what is applicable at the time. Don't become a GPS baby and just use a GPS. But don't use just my method either, because it doesn't do everything. Now, applying both of them, you are a master skill level that you can attain anything at any time.
Master Shifu.
I know, right? Well, except explaining it. I hacked it up so bad the first time. It was like 12 or 13 takes trying to explain it. I screwed up earlier, intersection and resection, just because I don't ever have to say it. I just do it.
Yeah.
And I got intersection and resection, the verbiage wrong. But it is amazing to me how many people do not know how to nav that go out in the woods. I mean, you're not to keep making fun of you, but you're one of them, right? You've mastered the GPS at a level probably higher than most.
I'm a guru.
Yeah. But if you know both, you start to leave the GPS in the pack, and you only turn it on when you need to. And I mean, the one thing I will say, Joe Bott and I were way back in Hell's Half Acre, and we were arguing where camp was, right? Mm-hmm. And he had a very large, very expensive GPS unit, and Joe can nav, right?
Yeah.
He's very proficient. But I just had my little piece of crap, $140 one. But where the problem lied was mine told me the azimuth to follow, mm-hmm. and then I flipped it over and I followed my little $20 Sunto, and I'm like, dude, camp's right there.
Your compass.
My compass, yeah. And I'm like, it's right there. And we're way up, right? Like we're like, well, it could be anywhere in 700 yards, and it's pissing rain. He's like, no, it's this way. He's following his compass on his GPS, which I'm not a fan of those compasses. It wasn't that Joe doesn't know how to nav, because he does. It wasn't that his GPS unit was good, because it's great. What it is the deficiencies in some of those electronic devices, nothing to do with the user or his ability to navigate, mm-hmm. but I do not depend on any kind of electronic compass ever, because they've screwed me I mean, dude, I've walked in circles, like walked a few feet. I'm like, well, you just point the right direction. Because, so I just quit using them completely, and I just use this little Sunto. Now, this does not have the Onyx hunt maps. It doesn't have you can't put them on here. It doesn't take a chip, right?
Right.
So I have a Oregon 550, mm-hmm. T, I think.
Garmin.
I don't know. Yeah, Garmin. Thank you. Garmin Oregon 550T. It does all kinds of things that I don't need it to do. But what it does do is it holds that OnX hunt map. And so I have that in there. And so anytime I could be breaking the law, I bring that GPS, right? Anytime there's private land around, that one comes with me. Again, applying what you need for each specific situation.
So at this point, how quickly can you look at your GPS, see your coordinates, your UTM coordinates, and shoot an azimuth?
So, okay, well, hold on. You didn't give a full equation there.
Oh, well, okay. So you have I guess, how quickly can you shoot an azimuth to where you're going when you identify a location?
So just to make sure everybody's understanding the question.
Let's say you have your UTM coordinates for your camp.
Mm-hmm.
How quickly can you shoot an azimuth to that camp?
60 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. Really, it takes longer for the GPS to do its part than it does me to do mine. Because it's pretty simple. I have my protractor in my belt pouch on my pack, right? I have a little kit there.
Yep.
It really, I've used it so much. I have that 8-digit grid, which I can read without a protractor for the most part. And then I add 10 or I subtract 10. It's that simple.
Then you're on your compass.
And I don't even the left add, right subtract. I've done it so much. Okay, left add, right subtract. That's for magnetic to grid. In reverse, grid to magnetic. So I automatically, in my head, have done it so much, I convert immediately and don't screw it up.
Yeah.
Most of it's done before I've even got anything out to do it manually, in the sense of the time I spend with this and the map is probably 45 seconds, depending upon how pinpoint I need to be.
Yeah.
So it doesn't take very long.
Got it.
Anything else you can think of?
No, I will say this. A quick plug here. There's a lot of in this podcast. There's a lot of visual aids. You took the time to draw on 50 pieces of paper to put together these visual aids, and
a lot of trees.
Yeah, and it really helps communicate and explain these concepts to see these visual aids. So, folks, guys, you can watch this on YouTube and see the video, or on our website and see the video. Now, if you're out in the woods or you're up where you don't have cell phone reception, you're not going to be able to stream YouTube. And that's where the Gritty Bowman TV really helps, because you can download the podcast to your actual personal device. If you have subscribed to the podcast in iTunes, then the audio version, then you can certainly do it with the video version. And I don't really care if a guy subscribes to Gritty Bowman TV or they don't, but it's a resource out there. If you subscribe to it, you can download this particular podcast, which I will have both NAB podcasts downloaded to my phone, so I can watch them anywhere, anytime, and refresh. I can sit there and go, how did I do that? Even when I'm up on top of the mountain, what was he saying? What did he mean by this? And I can just replay it, right? And so it's good. It's good to get it downloaded if you can. That's my plug. Go do that. It's a lot better than YouTube. Plus, you're not streaming your data, using your data plan to watch it. A lot of the podcasts are great to listen to. This is a particular one where it would be good to have the visual to go along with it.
Yeah, and there better be a lot of views on this thing on YouTube, because I have a lot of emails pestering the crap out of me to do one on Land Nav, which, if it was in person, it would have been easier. Explaining it was a lot rougher than I thought it would be.
Here's what I think, okay? I think it was a noble effort. I think what may have just happened is that there's a number of guys out there who said, I really want to know, but now have realized, man, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use my GPS. You know, that may be what some people walk away from this podcast with. That's their takeaway.
You're probably right. The one thing I will stress on is you will navigate 10 times faster once you learn the method that I use, because I don't have to turn the. I mean, let's
Yeah, I agree. I
Let's
think that
face it, I've seen so many guys every 5 feet looking down at the GPS. And I mean, at night, sometimes I have to do that if I don't figure everything out correctly, because you can't shoot an azimuth a long ways away. But even then, if you get good at not drifting off your azimuth and you shoot one, you're gonna have to look at it a little bit, but you don't have to follow your digital compass for
no.
one. You don't need to look at any maps. Once you become comfortable, you just look at your azimuth.
Yep. No, and what I would say is, it might seem difficult, but it's like anything. It's like when you first learn algebra, for example.
I never did. No, I'm just kidding.
X plus Y equals Z. It's like, what? Those are letters. They don't add together. You know what I mean? But once you start messing around with some stuff like this, it just clicks. And I think, and then it becomes second nature, and it's a very easy process to identify this stuff. I think it's a lot easier than it might seem once you get in there and start playing around with it.
Yeah. I mean, even the map scale is a little daunting, so don't overthink. If the number's little, it's really detailed. If the number's really big after the one, it's not very detailed.
And like you said, you might only take away from this 2 or 3 new skills out of, a whole package of 20 or 30, right? Like, hey, from now on, that's a good idea. I'm gonna navigate this way. I'm gonna pick up my like your peak over here, find out your GPS. You can do your azimuth just by looking at it, like generally, and just follow your compass there, right? I mean, point there and go.
You can also,
and that would mean actually having a compass you pull out and look at.
Yeah, exactly. There's a few other things that it might help with, is on a comical standpoint. Mm-hmm. I have heard some training numbers thrown out of distances traveled the GPS has told you that are probably not true. Mathematically, if someone tells me that I have just walked 6 miles before dinner in an hour with 40 pounds on, and they're in mediocre to less than mediocre shape, you were running. It can't happen, right? 4 miles an hour is moving, right? The 18th Airborne Corps standard for a 12-miler is 4 miles an hour, and you are hauling mail. And I've known guys to do it a lot less than I have. But on a training, if you are following the distance of your GPS, they're generally not accurate. But if you learn to plot your route out ahead of time, you can use a little wheelie thing. You can use a string or whatever the case may be to plot out your distance. You can get a little bit more real-life, actual pinpoint data on your training routes, for example. The GPS lies sometimes.
Aaron, some of us want to be lied to.
Well, a few times.
I prefer if my wife just lies to me. Brian, you are the most handsome man in the world. I'm okay with lying.
Yeah. On that note, I had to go watch, what was it that I watched last night?
Hunger Games.
Oh, Mother of Pearl. It was horrible movie. But I do that because I'm about ready to go to Mexico, and I have to keep my wife happy on a desert.
You guys went out and got some popcorn and watched you called me during intermission.
Yeah.
And it sounded like you were having a blast.
Oh, it was great. Well, she deals with a lot with me, right? Like, I'm sure, Joel Osteen, right? The blinker. Don't let him take your piece away. She says that a lot, but she says she gets feelers, right? And she'll hold them like this. She'll be like, "You hurt my feelers," and she'll hold them down because I said I was a dick, right? So, but her feelers sometimes turn into the devil's horns, right?
Yeah.
For specific times. Well, dealing with as much phone calls as I get because my phone's on all the time. I definitely have to suck it up and watch a chick flick from time to time.
Admit it. You liked it.
Yeah, it was great. There's some of them I can deal with, but yes, not to do anything with land nav, but more my life. My wife, I am certain, will never get land navigation ever. Some people I don't think are capable of fully grasping it. I have tried multiple. Well, I shouldn't say that. She doesn't give a crap.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably, a low aptitude for learning it, maybe. But
Yeah.
if it's something you love to do, spend time in the wilderness, find your way around.
Or you get really lost a couple times.
You could overcome your lack of natural inclination, natural ability to do it. So,
Yeah. But
Yeah.
the more you practice it, the better you'll get.
yeah.
So
Well, all right, dude. Well, let's wrap this sucker up. Thanks for all the work you put into this, man. Let's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hope this saves a few lives, Aaron. I think it will.
It'll save a few miles, which some of you should probably walk anyway. Just kidding. All
dude.
right.
Thanks, man. Stay gritty.
Yep.
All right, friends. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Don't forget about our deal with Mountain Ops. Type in the word gritty at checkout and get 20% off until the end of the year. For those of you who have not seen the Full Draw Film Tour this year and want to go, check out their website for their tour schedule. And if you haven't done so, go and subscribe to our YouTube channel or to the Gritty Bowman TV podcast on iTunes or Podbean so you can see all the latest video content we have produced. And be sure to have a look at the new Elk 101 website where you can find our podcast and other great elk hunting content. Thank you for taking the time to leave us your feedback. We really appreciate your sincere support of our show. Finally, let me leave you with this quote by President Theodore Roosevelt, who in 1905 said, "In a civilized and cultivated country, wild animals only continue to exist at all when preserved by sportsmen. The excellent people who protest against all hunting and consider sportsmen as enemies of wildlife are ignorant of the fact that in reality, the genuine sportsman is by all odds the most important factor in keeping the larger and more valuable wild creatures from total extermination." Friends, always take the time to educate those around you about your role as a hunter in preserving the wild creatures of this world. If you don't, who will? As always, good luck on your hunts and stay gritty.
This is Ty Stubblefield, and you're listening to the Gritty Bowman.
Gritty Bowman.